Newfoundland, the most easterly of Canada's provinces, represents the northeasternmost extension of the Appalachian Mountain system in North America. A mere 580 million years ago, this island was once a part of Africa, and only after that time it was formed by continental drift. In the past 200 million years, Newfoundland has been formed and reformed by erosion, with rivers stripping rock from the land surfaces, carrying it to the ocean to be deposited offshore. Even today, much of the Newfoundland coast is sinking and being returned to the sea as the land settles. Submerged shorelines and drowned forests are common indicators of this rising sea level around the coast. Human occupation began first in Labrador and can be traced back 9,000 years to the Maritime Beothuk people, who had for centuries before been scattered groups of sea mammal hunters. Then, 3,500 years later, their descendants moved on to the island of Newfoundland. They created settlements of longhouses, and they used a material called chert, a crystalline rock of many colours, for an early form of currency. It was also valuable in the making of stone tools and could be struck against other kinds of rocks to make a spark for fire. This civilization was greatly affected by the medieval warm period 1,000 years ago, which caused a massive decline in sea ice and had a devastating impact upon their way of life. The island of Newfoundland was first visited by the Icelandic Viking Leif Erickson in the 11th century, who called the new land Vinland. The origin of the name Vinland has variously been the land where grapevines grow, or as the Meadowlands. Either way, the Vikings thought this a very fertile place. For a century or two, they happily colonized parts of the island. In 1496, John Cabot obtained a charter from the English King Henry VII to sail to find new lands and to find a sea route to the Orient. This, of course, was 4 years or so after Christopher Columbus had found what he at first thought was India in the Caribbean. The letters of charter to John Cabot, who was born Giovanni Caboto in Venice, read like this: Henry, by the grace of God, King of England, France, and Lord of Ireland, to all whom these presents shall come, greetings. Be it known that we have given and granted to our well-beloved John Cabot, citizen of Venice, full and free authority, leave and power to sail to all parts, countries, and seas of the east, of the west, and of the north, to seek out, discover, and find, and set up our banners and ensigns in all such newly discovered lands, and subdue, occupy, and possess all such in the King's name. Historians disagree on whether Cabot landed in Nova Scotia in 1497 or in Newfoundland, or possibly in Maine, if he landed at all. But Bonavista is recognised by the governments of Canada and the United Kingdom as being Cabot's official landing place. So having said that, John Cabot, on the 24th of June 1497, is claimed to have landed in Cape Bonavista. Cabot set sail from Bristol, England, on his ship the Matthew in 1497, and when Cabot first saw land, he is reputed to have said, "O buon vista," meaning, in Venetian Italian, "Oh, happy sight," giving rise to the name of the town and nearby Cape Bonavista. Although Cabot found none of the rare spices he had hoped for, the fishing grounds were so plentiful that the crew could dip their buckets in the water and fill them with codfish. King Henry VII was pleased enough to reward Cabot the impressive sum of £10, and so the Bonavista boom began. The lighthouse at Cape Bonavista was built in 1843, and the first light installed there, built in 1811, was transferred from the lighthouse at Inch Cape Bell Rock in Scotland. It served to 1966, when the newer steel tower, built beside the old lighthouse, assumed the role. Its first keeper, Jeremiah White, tended the oil lamps and polished the brass and the glass of the light for many decades. The The surrounding land and seascape is rugged and austere from the perpetual forces of wind and water assaulting their surfaces. Much of the shoreline rock has been scrubbed smooth by relentlessly pounding surf over eons of time. The rhythmic sound is relaxing and quickly becomes background sound. The constant noise of the sea, the wind, and the shrieking seabirds is an essential part of the overall experience, where one's very existence seems dwarfed by the towering cliffs. Great caverns and spires of rocks have been carved by the relentless sea to create a fantastic seascape. There isn't a rock, cliff, tree or cave around Newfoundland without a legend or myth attached to it, and Catalina is no different, with the mystery of the Resolven. On August the 27th, 1884, the sailing ship Resolven had left Harbour Grace, Newfoundland, bound for Labrador with a cargo of salt, a crew of 7, and 4 Newfoundland passengers. A few days later, near Catalina, Newfoundland, the British gunboat, the Mallard, found the Resolven floating on the open sea. When the crew of the Mallard signalled the other boat, they received no response, so proceeded to board her. What the British sailors found aboard the ship was a complete mystery, for there were no passengers nor crew on the Resolven. Clothing and other personal items were found undisturbed on the ship, and there was absolutely no sign of trouble. The galley held a table laid ready for a meal, and a fire still burned in the stove. The surrounding water was searched, but no sign of the crew or passengers was ever to be found. However, the lifeboat was missing, and there was an iceberg floating nearby. Little is known of John Cabot, born Giovanni Caboto, in Venice around 1450. Cabot left England in an age of exploration, when Spain, Portugal, England, Holland and France were seeking untapped resources in the West. Cabot left England with 15 crew and 3 sons in 1497 aboard the Matthew. Cabot, aiming to reach the East Indies on a westerly route, set sail across the North Atlantic. 4.5 weeks later, he sighted land, arrived in Newfoundland, and stepped ashore to take possession of the land on behalf of King Henry VII. Following a marked trail, Cabot and his men came to a clearing with signs of a dead campfire and a short stick that had been carved and painted. The abandoned site quite likely belonged to the Beothuk people. Cabot replenished their water supply, got nervous, and returned to his ship, which he sailed along the coast for a month before returning to England. Cabot, still seeking fame and fortune, returned to further explore North America in 1498. This second voyage was a failure. Supplies ran low, and Cabot didn't find the fortunes that he sought. He turned back for England, and it's thought that Cabot's fleet was lost at sea. Cabot perished on this return voyage without knowing that his discovery of the vast supply of cod on the Grand Banks would feed the world for 500 years before reaching depletion. He would never return to his newfound land. To celebrate Cabot's arrival 500 years ago, a replica of the ship Matthew sailed the Atlantic from England and rests in the Bonavista Museum. Matthew is 24 metres long and 6.25 metres wide. On Newfoundland's Avalon Peninsula is the East Coast Trail, which links 32 historical communities and provides a challenging 265-kilometre coastal hiking experience. It passes by the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve of 4 islands: Gull Island, Green Island, Great and Pewee Islands. The reserve contains North America's largest Atlantic puffin colony of more than 260,000 pairs of birds, and the world's second largest Leach's storm petrel colony with more than 620,000 pairs that come to nest there annually. The East Coast Trail sweeps the eastern shores of the Irish loop of roads and trails, along which are reflected over 400 years of history by Irish immigrant settlers. The loop, as it's more commonly called, is at the heart of Newfoundland's Irish culture and heritage. Since the 1500s, fishing has attracted Europeans to fish along the Avalon Peninsula. European nations initially harvested northern cod to feed France, England, Spain, and Portugal's growing populations. However, by the 1700s, Spain and Portugal went elsewhere, leaving the French and the English to fight over the abundant resources until 1815, when Britain defeated Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. So France did not just lose the Battle of Waterloo, they lost the fishing rights in Newfoundland too. During this time, communities on the Avalon Peninsula grew from small seasonal stations to year-round settlements. By the early 1800s, large numbers of Irish began settling year-round and caused the region's demographics to be changed forever. By the mid-1800s, unlike in other parts of Newfoundland, because of the mass emigrations from Ireland during the Great Famine, the overwhelming number of settlers in the Irish Loop area were Roman Catholic and of Irish descent. Newfoundland has 29,000 kilometres of bays, inlets, headlands, harbours and coves, and a cool summer humid climate, which is greatly influenced by the sea, since no part of the island is more than 100 kilometres from the ocean. The East Coast Trail is the perfect place to be alone, yet never too far from modern amenities, where the sounds of herring gulls, great black-backed gulls, black-legged kittiwakes, guillemots and gannets fill the air. Thickly matted Tuckamore spruce or fir trees grow only in the most exposed coastal areas. Though they appear to be stunted in nature, many of them are probably several decades old. Crowberry carpets the forest. Old man's beard hangs from the conifers. Beach peas are on the rolling stones, and rhododendron and azalea colour the bogs, water lilies are on the ponds, and Indian pipe is in the glades. It is a paradise for the botanist. This East Coast Trail includes the French village La Manche, meaning the sleeve, named for the shape of the harbour, which is long and narrow with high sides. Settled around 1840, this secluded harbour offered perfect cover during raids on nearby Ferryland and St. John's. La Manche was once the best fishing cove on the southern shore. It was first settled by Englishman George Melvin, who moved from Brunt Cove 3 kilometres away. Melvin was soon followed by other family members and friends, and a thriving little community developed. Although isolated and with a terrain that made the building of homes difficult, moorings for fishing boats were built and fish drying facilities were constructed. Somehow the community survived, and a school was built in La Manche around 1919. After Confederation and union with Canada, in 1949 the La Manche School was closed as it did not have the minimum required 11 students. It survived without a resident clergyman or a doctor. A lawkeeper was appointed to the community, but court records locally contain no mention of any law-breaking or accused or convicted criminals, so he must have had the easiest job in the village. The population of La Manche ranged between 7 to 55 over more than a 100-year span. On January the 25th, 1966, a severe winter storm hit the east coast of the Avalon Peninsula, and an enormous tidal wave washed into the harbour, removing all the boats, the moorings and the docks of La Manche, as well as the suspension bridge. Most of the houses were demolished, but miraculously there were no deaths attributed to the storm. With the village largely destroyed, the residents were relocated. For many years, La Manche was a forgotten footnote to history, but the development of the East Coast Trail brought it back into the spotlight. In 1999, a pedestrian bridge was constructed by the East Coast Trail Association to replace the earlier bridge that was washed away when the community of La Manche was destroyed in the 1966 storm, thus completing the continuity of the East Coast Trail. Also on the East Coast Trail is Ferryland, founded by Lord Baltimore in 1621. Not only one of the most historic communities in Newfoundland, but in all of North America. Its name means standing out or separated from the mainland, and it is. Ferryland, as one of Canada's most easterly villages, uses the alpha-numerically lowest postal code or zip code in Canada, starting with A0A. With its rich Irish culture, Ferryland was originally established as a station for migratory fishermen in the late 16th century, and over the years they left behind many traces of their existence. Virtually forgotten for centuries, excavations of the original settlement began in earnest in the late 1980s and continue to this day. The buildings, constructed of stone, have left substantial remains. Archaeologists have uncovered over 1 million artifacts to date, gold rings, Portuguese ceramics and other unusual objects, as well as a smithy or blacksmith's forge, a stone-walled well, a sea-flush toilet, and the pretty street that was described in very early accounts. There is evidence of earlier occupations by Beothuk Indians and later by Basque fishermen from northern Spain. The Royal Gazette of the 16th of June 1829 announced that Shanordathit, otherwise called Nancy, the last surviving member of the Newfoundland Beothuk tribe, had died of tuberculosis. On this day, the Aboriginal group became extinct. The Beothuk are now a tribe without people. Cape Spear, located on the Avalon Peninsula near St. John's, is the easternmost point in North America. The Portuguese named this location Cabo da Esperança, which means Cape of Hope, which became Cap d'Espoir in French, and finally, since, like everywhere in the world that the English went, they could not get their tongues round the French word, espoir, they anglicised to Cape Spear. This lighthouse, the second to be established in Newfoundland, has operated at Cape Spear since September 1836. This site was chosen for a new lighthouse because of the dangerous rocky eastern coast near the entrance to St. John's Harbour. The first light used at Cape Spear was an 1815 light that was brought from Inchkeith in Scotland. It had 7 burners and curved reflectors. A foghorn was added in 1878. The history of Cape Spear inevitably involves the story of the Cantwell family because, for generations, this famous family managed the lighthouse for over 150 years. They resided at Cape Spear and worked tirelessly to maintain the light and the foghorn, so vital to mariners. If one stands with their back to the sea, the entire population of North America is to the west, and if one faces the sea, the next stop east is Ireland. During the Second World War, a gun battery was installed at Cape Spear to defend the entrance to St. John's Harbour. Barracks and underground passages leading to the bunkers were built for the use of troops stationed there, and remnants of these can still be seen. Dominating the skyline, neighbouring Cape Spear, and overlooking the narrow entrance to the harbour of St. John's, is Signal Hill, where fortifications have been in place since the mid-17th century. At this spectacular viewpoint, you can easily imagine the crack of muskets and the roar of cannon fire, for over the years the British and French soldiers battled fiercely to control this strategic location. Since June the 27th, 1762, the French and English have taken and retaken, retreated and surrendered the hill many times back and forth. Initially named the Lookout by Lieutenant Colonel Amherst, it was renamed Signal Hill because of the signalling that took place from its summit. flag communications between land and sea would take place there from the 17th century until 1960, and the United States maintained anti-aircraft guns on the hill during World War II. Newfoundland was claimed as an English colony in the name of Queen Elizabeth I in 1583, temporarily captured by the Dutch in 1665, and attacked 3 times by the French, who captured and destroyed its settlements in 1689 and 1707. St. John's was retaken by the British each time and refortified. The impressive and imposing Cabot Tower was commissioned in 1897 to commemorate both the 400th anniversary of John Cabot's arrival in Newfoundland and Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. The tower's late Gothic revival architecture was designed by St. John's architect William Howe Green. In 1901, Signal Hill made history again when Guglielmo Marconi, using an antenna hoisted 500 feet by a kite, received the first transatlantic wireless signal, simply the letter S in Morse code. Marconi's breakthrough led to a new age in communication technology which continues to the present day. Tradition has it that the city of St. John's got its name from when explorer John Cabot, the first European to sail into the harbour, did so on the feast of St. John the Baptist, the 24th of June, 1497. However, it was also claimed that he had first arrived quite a way up the coast at Bonavista. He could not have been in both places at the same time. St. John's is often compared to San Francisco due to its hilly terrain and steep maze of residential streets. Newfoundland's capital, the oldest and most easterly city in North America, is the perfect combination of big city luxury and small town charm, where strong feelings of heritage live and history runs deep. Isolation is probably what keeps the accent, heard in St. John's, very similar to that of Waterford in southeast Ireland. The worst disaster to befall St. John's was on July the 8th, 1892, and is commonly called the Great Fire, destroying much of the city. Another major fire burned in the same neighbourhoods on December the 21st, 1992, destroying over a dozen businesses and leaving hundreds of people homeless. Crisscrossing streets were traversed by horse and carriage for hundreds of years, and brightly coloured low-rise old buildings blend with the new. This city has a vibrant culture, a rich history and a warm personality, and has been an important communications and supply route through 2 world wars. It has survived 5 centuries of countless hardships and triumphs. It is a place where turquoise and lime green houses make amiable neighbours on steep city streets, where ocean fresh air ripples through tiny gardens and sprawling barrens, and has an altogether feeling of sweetness and amiability. The Newfoundland dog, or Newfie, is known for its giant size, tremendous strength, calm disposition, and loyalty. These dogs excel at water rescue and life-saving because of their muscular build, thick double coat, webbed feet, and innate swimming abilities. They were originally bred and used as working dogs for fishermen in the Old Dominion of Newfoundland. In 1815, an unnamed Newfoundland dog is credited for saving the life of Napoleon Bonaparte. During his famous escape from exile on the island of Elba, rough seas knocked Napoleon overboard. A fisherman's Newfoundland dog jumped into the sea and kept Napoleon afloat until he could reach safety. If he had not done this, it might have rendered unnecessary the Battle of Waterloo and changed history. The 19th century humorist Josh Billings summed up the Newfoundland dog in this way: "Newfoundland dogs are good to save children from drowning, but you must have a pond of water handy and a child, or else there'll be little profit in boarding a Newfoundland." Yet their value is priceless, and they are beloved worldwide. Kitividi village is little more than a handful of old fishing shacks, backdropped by sharp-edged cliffs and set beside the blue-black waters of a slender inlet near to the city of St. John's. This historic fishing village is locally called The Gut. Atop the entrance to Kiddi-Vidi Harbour is the battery, now the Kiddi-Vidi Battery Provincial Historic Site, which held great significance during the War of 1812. Amid the few houses and funky shops is Newfoundland's largest microbrewery, the Kiddi-Vidi Brewing Company, that brews a refreshingly light lager made with 25,000 years old iceberg water harvested from Newfoundland's awe-inspiring icebergs that drift by from the Arctic every spring. Newfoundland's early stream of colonizers was first led by Cabot and later attracted fishermen and settlers. They roamed this land and fished the sea for codfish. Some stayed for a short time and then left. Yet many, many stayed. Their artifacts lie everywhere, for along the shores and in the Atlantic Ocean around this island are the untouched burial grounds for countless shipwrecks waiting to be explored. Newfoundland has a love affair with its long, rich historical past. It appears to have a happy life in the present and a strong curiosity for its future. There is no other city quite like St. John's in the Americas. Its warmth is infectious, and its people demonstrate a sincerity that comes with every nod, word and wave. It's amazing how quickly this feeling gets into your heart. It is absolutely true that there is nobody quite like a Newfoundlander. Perhaps the greatest of all Newfies, as they are called, was Joey Smallwood, who was born in poverty in 1900 and, almost single-handedly, cajoled, bullied and persuaded the people of the British colony of Newfoundland to pass a referendum in favour of joining the country of Canada as one of its provinces. In 1949, at the age of 50, he became the first Premier or Prime Minister of the province of Newfoundland in the Confederation of Canada. It was a massive change for this island community, wonderfully described and documented in Wayne Johnston's brilliant novel, The Colony of Unrequited Dreams. Like a barnacle to a boat, Newfoundland sticks with you forever once you've visited it. From the first book of melodies composed and written at Harbour Grace in Newfoundland by the Governor of Newfoundland, Robert Hayman, in 1628. Although in clothes, company, buildings fair with England, Newfoundland cannot compare. But everyone should know what contentment I found there, always enough, most times somewhat to spare, with little pains, less toil and lesser care, exempt from taxings, ill news, lawlessness and fear, clean and warm no matter what you wear, healthy and wealthy, if men careful are, with much, much more than I will now declare. I say, if some wise men knew what this were, I do believe they'd live no otherwhere than Newfoundland.